Broken Arrow 911. Broken Arrow 911. Hello?
For most people, the safest place they could ever be is their home. And yet, for the Beaver family of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, their home became a torture cell and execution chamber. Their screams were heard from around the neighborhood, and police only found out because one of the victims called 911 for help. The caller is clearly a child, and he's just one of many children that died that day in a brutal act of violence. No guns were used during the assault. The assailants preferred a much more intimate method of murder, so they used knives to claim the 5 lives that were lost that day. This is the story of the Beaver family, of the day half of its members were slaughtered like animals, and how a culture of glorifying violence contributed to their horrifying end. We're going to unpack how the perpetrators took inspiration from some of the most tragic mass killings in America and aspired to go further than any murderer had gone before. David and April Beaver weren't exactly the most normal people. In fact, there was a lot about their life that many might find strange. According to the Broken Arrow community, nothing really stood out about the Beavers, but that's not because they were an everyday family. They were more like ghosts, seldom heard from and even more rarely seen. They interact with their neighbors only when necessary and chose to homeschool each of their 7 children. Their entire relationship was strikingly unusual. When they met in 1987, David was 24 years old and April was only 15 years old. The age gap didn't really get in the way of their relationship, though. They quickly settled down, and in the mid-90s, they got to work starting the big family they'd always wanted. The first child to come was Robert in 1996, followed by Michael in 1998. They became the older brothers to Crystal, Daniel, Victoria, and the baby Autumn, who was just about 2 years old at the time of the incident in 2015. It's possible that the Beavers started such a large family because they didn't want anything to do with the outside world. Their kids were forbidden from talking to anyone else in the neighborhood, and they spent almost all of their time at home. Their seclusion was so complete that some neighbors only found out the Beavers' family name after the incident took place. But even though the Beavers were uniquely antisocial, they weren't exactly backwards. David was a tech consultant for HP Enterprise Services, and while April was a stay-at-home mom, she regularly used Reddit under the username AOKMom. Her posting history shows how deeply she loved her children, how she thought they were perfect, and that she wouldn't trade them for the world. She also spoke about wanting to live near the mountains or the ocean, and that her home state of Oklahoma didn't have either of those things. Most importantly, April talked about how she wanted her children to be tech-savvy. She wanted them to learn about computers and potentially become web designers and coders someday. It's safe to say that the Beavers didn't restrict their kids from the ever-growing inflow of 21st century tech. But as it turns out, this molded their impressionable minds in unexpectedly dark ways. Since he wasn't allowed to go out much or make friends with kids in the neighborhood, Robert did what any kid growing up in the 21st century did, found a community online. Or, more accurately, he tried to find an online community. What he wanted more than anything else was to be famous. So he created a YouTube account in 2013, hoping to make it big.
Salute. Hey everyone, it's me, Cult Empire. In case you didn't know, you found me by accident, or you're expecting someone else. Why would you do that? Anyway, this is the second first ever update, which I think is a major improvement. I tried a news report theme last time. That's not very vloggy, is it? So I'm being a little more chillinated, writing stuff, scripting. I'm going to make my first skit soon. Can't show you a sneak preview or it would ruin it. It'll be like a minute long. It's going to be some good stuff. I think it's going to be hilarious.
On this YouTube channel, Robert talked about Minecraft, his opinions on society, and his plans to make more content in the future. Notably, the last video uploaded to this channel features his little brother Michael, with whom Robert had a special bond. They spent a lot of time together, much of it on the internet where they'd go through videos and developed an obsession of sorts with spree killings and mass murders like the Columbine Massacre and the Aurora Theater shooting. Robert would later say that his parents had extreme beliefs, which, if true, might have inspired him to idolize killers. According to him, his parents were full of hatred and couldn't wait for a biblical apocalypse so that they could get retribution for everything they despised in the world. It's possible that David and April were antisocial, but Robert and Michael certainly were. Neighbors reported that they tended to behave strangely. In one incident, Michael was found staring blankly at the people next door, and he wouldn't respond when called out to. Clearly, something terrible was going on underneath the surface, and there's a chance that David made it even worse. It's been alleged that he was both physically and verbally abusive to his children, though the extent of this hasn't been verified. We do know that one of the children confirmed that David had a violent streak, which seemed to suggest that Robert and Michael potentially learned a lot from their father in that regard. But at the same time, any abuse that took place didn't explain why Robert and Michael became so obsessed with brutal violence. Regardless of the why, the two brothers soon started fantasizing about committing acts of violence. They fantasized about shooting up schools, murdering people in their own homes, and going on killing rampages across their town. According to Robert, these fantasies were just a way for him to express his internal rage. They weren't meant to be taken seriously, and they definitely weren't blueprints for what he wanted to do in real life. But as we will soon reveal, these murderous ideations weren't just flights of fancy. Before too long, they became too intense for Robert to hold in. In 2014, Robert got a job at a religious call center. His parents, both of whom were very religious themselves, were overjoyed that their son was taking such an interest in their faith. What they didn't know was that the whole point of the job was to collect funds that would help Robert act out his violent fantasies. Michael, who had always looked up to his older brother, was involved from the very beginning. They wanted to do something big, something that would be put in the history books. They wanted to make the shooters at Columbine and Sandy Hook seem like rookies in comparison. Basically, they wanted to kill as many people as possible, and they eventually settled on 50 people. However, they couldn't just go out and start murdering random citizens. They needed to practice first, so that their killing spree would live up to all they wanted it to be. They also needed weapons and ammunition, so they started gathering it the first chance they got. By the summer of 2015, Robert and Michael had Kevlar vests, helmets, guns, and bullets. Robert had saved every single penny he could from the call center job, and it paid for the personal armory that could unleash hell on Broken Arrow in the blink of an eye.
Where were you going to go? I mean, where was going to be your mass plan to get the most people, the most bang for your buck?
We're just heading generally towards Washington State. We're going to do it statewide.
Did you guys have, like, were you going to go, I mean, who else were you going to kill? Just whoever you ran into?
Yeah, pretty much. We said 5 at a time, like gas stations, restaurants.
Okay, and then just keep going.
Yep.
The final piece of their murderous puzzle was a consignment of 3,000 rounds of ammunition. It was due to arrive on July 23rd, but there was a problem. Their parents would be understandably concerned if they saw their sons receiving thousands of bullets. This was something Robert and Michael wouldn't tolerate. And so, the murder of the Beaver family was planned out for 2 reasons. Firstly, Robert and Michael needed to practice their craft before heading out on their real spree, and secondly, they had to make sure their parents were dead before the bullets arrived. The stage was set, and Robert and Michael were ready to put their plan into action. By the way, I post true crime and new cases here every day, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing. It helps a lot. The perpetrators got ready to wipe out their family on July 22nd, 2015. Their sister, Crystal, had seen them wearing Kevlar vests and other types of body armor previously, and had told their mother about their weird behavior. However, April just told their daughter that boys will be boys, probably assuming that her sons were messing around. At around 11 p.m. on the night of the incident, Crystal got another sight of her brothers wearing tactical gear when she went to their bedroom. She was likely going to ask them to wash the dishes or perform some other chore before they went to bed. But she ended up walking in on them right as they were about to execute their plan. When Michael saw her, he asked Robert if they should go ahead with the plan now. Robert said yes, and the pair immediately started stabbing and slashing at their sister with large knives. They went so far as to slit Crystal's throat, but the 13-year-old girl's will to live was too great. Since they thought she was already dead, she slowly started crawling towards the front door. As she inched to freedom, she heard her mother screaming. Robert and Michael had started attacking their parents. David suffered 28 stab wounds to the neck, torso, head, and face. It was a brutal, unrelenting assault, the kind you'd expect from a wild animal, not a human being. However, what the perpetrators did to their mother was even more gruesome. April was stabbed nearly 50 times all across her body, but that's not how she died. A medical examiner later reported that she'd been killed by blunt force trauma to the head. This means that the homicidal brothers either stabbed her relentlessly before bashing her head in, or their hatred for her was so potent that they ravaged her corpse with their knives. By this point, Robert had noticed that Crystal had escaped. Her wounds were so severe that she'd collapsed outside, so Robert headed out and dragged her back in. This left a trail of blood on the driveway, something that would prove crucial later on.
Who else was in the bathroom?
I think Victoria might have been in there. About
Victoria?
Yeah, my 4-year-old sister.
4-year-old, okay.
There's no way to know exactly what happened next, but reports confirm that 7-year-old Christopher and 4-year-old Victoria were locked in the bathroom for their safety. Since they were far too young to be able to think of a plan like this, it's possible that their older brother Daniel told them to go in and lock the door behind him. He knew he had to do something. Anything to save his family. He didn't have time to think about why his brothers were slaughtering everyone he loved. Daniel headed to a phone as Robert dragged Crystal back into the house. Michael headed to the bathroom and knocked, asking the kids to open the door. There's a chance that Daniel had told him not to open the door for anyone, and the children did as their older brother and protector said. But Michael was the older brother too, and he was laser focused on his desire to kill everyone in the house except Robert. Michael started pretending that Robert was attacking him and begged the kids to open the bathroom door. Eventually, the innocent children, probably confused and disoriented by all the chaos, opened the door. They were killed instantly, with Christopher getting stabbed 21 times and Victoria receiving 23 stab wounds. While all of this was happening, April spoke her final words, shouting at Daniel to call 911. The 12-year-old hid himself in a bedroom and called the police. And despite how shaken he was able to quickly and efficiently describe the situation to the operator.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, where are you at?
Broken out, Oklahoma 7411.
What address?
709 Magnolia Court.
Okay. Are you the only one there?
No, my brother's attacking my family.
Your dad is attacking your family?
No, my brother. He has an idea stealing me. Oh, millions of people now.
Okay, who's attacking your family?
What?
Who's attacking your family?
Yes.
Who is it? Do they have...
I'll call them.
The call ends with what sounds like pleading from Daniel. It's possible that he was pleading with Michael as he raised the knife over his head. The pleas went unanswered, and Daniel suffered 21 stab wounds before he died. Overall, the Beaver family was stabbed 150 times. The sheer physical exertion of the attack would have left Robert and Michael feeling utterly exhausted. That's when they heard the sounds of police sirens in the distance. Even though Daniel hadn't been able to provide details during the 911 call, the operator had heard enough to know that something was terribly wrong. She dispatched police officers to the scene, and when they arrived, they saw the blood that Crystal had left on the porch. They knocked on the door. Crystal, who was miraculously still alive, was able to weakly call out to the officers. They immediately broke down the door and headed inside, finding Crystal bleeding on the floor. It didn't take long for them to find the rest of the victims, along with 2-year-old Autumn, who'd somehow been spared. However, her survival wasn't the result of mercy from her brothers. Later reports revealed they intended to behead her, saving her as the last course in their grotesque homicidal buffet. But the police arrived before they could see their plan through. The 2 teen culprits fled out the back door and tried to hide in the woods behind the family home. More police arrived, and a canine unit was dispatched. The dogs caught the scent of the killers fairly quickly, and Robert and Michael were found hiding in a bush. Michael was quivering and afraid, but Robert was carrying a knife. Pictures taken of the culprits before they were booked show Michael looking absolutely miserable, but Robert has a smug smile on his face, as if this is what he'd wanted all along. Crystal was taken to the hospital where she had to undergo surgery while her brothers were taken to the police station. When he was interrogated, Robert apparently showed no signs of remorse. His interview has never been released to the public, but we do know that he talked about how he wanted to be famous and that was the sole motive behind the mass murder. Both brothers were charged with 5 counts of murder in the first degree, along with an additional count of assault with intent to kill. On July 6, 2016, while awaiting trial in custody, Robert tried to commit suicide by tying his bedsheet into a noose. Perhaps he'd deluded himself into thinking this was a romantic end to his supposedly heroic quest. As it turned out, the noose was ineffective, and Robert didn't experience any injuries from the attempt. He was placed on suicide watch, and the 2 brothers attended their separate trials. Robert had initially pleaded not guilty to the charges. After the suicide attempt, he changed his plea to guilty and was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. As for Michael, the judge determined that he should be tried as an adult. He initially tried to plead insanity, but he was eventually convicted on all counts as well, and received a sentence of 5 consecutive life terms plus 28 years. The brothers were jailed in separate facilities. Robert was sent to Joseph Harp Correctional Center, whereas Michael was sent to Lexington Correctional Center. The younger culprit showed a deteriorating state of mind, with inmates reporting that he made grotesque, violent drawings in crayon, possibly to make him seem tougher than he was. While in jail, Robert was diagnosed with a number of mental illnesses, many involving psychosis. Prison doctors theorized that he had major depressive disorder, borderline personality disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. They also prescribed him medication for schizophrenia. Based on how Robert has behaved in jail, all that medical attention doesn't seem to have had much of an effect. In 2019, he tried attacking prison staff with a makeshift shiv, indicating that his violent impulses haven't gone away. Crystal and Autumn, the sole survivors of the massacre, were eventually adopted by the same family. This was done to ensure they could stay together, something that might help them overcome the immense tragedy their brothers had put them through. As for the Beaver family home, it fell into a state of disrepair as it sat vacant for years. No one wanted to buy a house where something so gruesome had occurred. It became a popular spot for ghost hunters and other fans of the macabre until it was destroyed in a fire on March 18, 2017. Just weeks after the city council made plans to buy it and demolish it. The cause of the fire remains unknown, but it's possible that someone wanted to rid Broken Arrow of this tragic reminder. 2 years later, Reflection Park was opened to honor the memory of the Beaver family. The park contains a path that goes through a seemingly innocuous patch of grass, where the scene of the massacre once stood. It's highly likely that Crystal and Autumn changed their names to protect their privacy. All remnants of the Beaver family, including their home, are now gone. So, what do you think of this case? Did Michael deserve to be tried as an adult, considering Robert was the mastermind? Or was he just as complicit in the murders? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you like the way we create these videos and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thank you once again for watching.